Hello friends, welcome to this online refresher course, that is Concerns in Educational Research and Assessment under ARPIT 2019. In this part of Concerns in Educational Research and Assessment, I am here to deal with concerns in educational research. I am Ashish Srivastav from Mahatma Gandhi Central University, East Champaran, Bihar, and extending my greetings to you all on behalf of National Resource Center for Education, that is NRC for Education, Central University of South Bihar, Gaya. Friends, I am here to discuss with you on a very important and relevant topic, that is fundamentals of descriptive research. Especially this part of research is having many inconsistencies, many confusions and many dichotomies which you can see across the literature. While we will be discussing this topic, in different parts. In first part, we shall talk about understanding descriptive research, while in next part of the discussion we will be focusing on major approaches under descriptive research. Now, let us start the first part of the discussion, and the objectives of this part are that after completing this session you will be able to understand the background of descriptive research, meaning of descriptive research, purpose of descriptive research and types of descriptive research. Now, firstly, let us talk about background of descriptive research. In order to understand the background of descriptive research, we need to go in little flashback and we need to start from the definition of research itself. I am here not going to explain or tell you the bookish definition of research, while I will be discussing only the general definition of research, which says research refers to a process wherein systematic activities are done to find the solution of a problem or extension of knowledge. While referring this definition, we have focused on systematic activities. Now, what do we mean by these systematic activities? Again, when we are saying that systematic activities, there are inconsistency between different books. Traditionally, we are having 5 systematic activities in any process of research, that is identification of a research problem, a statement of hypothesis, data collection, data analysis and writing the report. While stating these 5 steps, it seems very easy, but these 5 steps are comprising the whole paradigm of research methodology and statistics. For example, if you want to identify research, if you want to identify the problems of research, you need to have competency on variables, objectives, writing research questions, etc. For example, if you see, variable in itself is having plenty of theoretical background which you need to understand as a researcher, then only you will be able to know the types of variables, the forms of variables, and then only you can realize the difference or discrimination between non-experimental and experimental research. Friends, while discussing this definition of research and steps of research, and with your understanding of previous classes, you are aware that over a period of time, quantitative researchers have developed various standards designed to facilitate the planning of the research studies. Now, what these designs are comprised of? These designs involve a standard procedure for organizing variables, selecting samples, scheduling data collection, scheduling appropriate analysis techniques and reporting. Now, organizing variable in itself is a Herculean task. For organizing variable, you need to have complete understanding on the types and forms of variables. Selecting sample, for selecting sample you must be having sound knowledge of whole sampling technique. Now, based on different designs, classification became relevant. As a result, two major sets were formulated. In whole educational research, all the classification you can classify in two groups, one is non-experimental and another is experimental. Under non-experimental there are different approaches, experimental is having different kind of approaches. Non-experimental designs are similar in that the researcher studies the phenomena as they exist. This point you need to understand, the phenomena as they exist, that means you are not in a position to manipulate, to intervene, to give your treatment. You must be aware on four primary purposes of educational research, with description, prediction, improvement and explanation. Now, keeping in view this four paradigm, researchers whose purpose is description will employ survey research design if the intent to study phenomena as they exist. But if the purpose of a research study is prediction, a correlation research design is used. If the researcher's purpose is explanation, the focus of the study will be on understanding cause and effect relationships between variables. However, correlational and experimental designs can also be used as well. The choice of one type of design or another depends on several factors. As a researcher, you need to understand those factors, you need to understand the whole context from where you are selecting your variable, from where you are taking your sample, what is the freedom in your hand, and then keeping in view this holistic situation, you can decide what kind of approach you are going to use in your research. Now, after discussing the background of descriptive research, we will be discussing the meaning of descriptive research. Friends, if you are conducting descriptive research, that means you are trying to understand events that are occurring in the present and how they might relate to other factors. That means in this paradigm of research, that is descriptive research, you are focusing on present. Before proceeding ahead, let me make myself very clear that for several approaches we have, for our understanding, several kind of central questions. For example, when we do historical research, the central question of historical research is what was. When we do descriptive research, the central question for descriptive research is what is, and when we do experimental research, the central question for experimental research is what will be. Having said this, it is now clear that descriptive research is going to answer what is. That means we need to be in present. In descriptive research, you generate questions, hypotheses, collect data and continue as if you are conducting any types of research. In that sense, in descriptive research, you are not going to take any extra steps. What you are going to do is, you are going to select your problem, you are going to state your hypothesis, you are going to collect the data, you are going to analyze the data and you are going to report it. Now, you need to understand the purpose of descriptive research. The purpose of descriptive research is to describe the current state of affairs at the time of study. For example, if you want to know how many teachers use a particular teaching method, you could ask a group of students to complete a questionnaire, thereby measuring the outcome as it occurs. The most significant difference between descriptive research and experimental research is that descriptive research does not include a treatment or a control group. As we have discussed earlier also, in descriptive research you are selecting variables from present situation which is not manipulable, and you are not in a position to manipulate your variable or give treatment to your variable or to see the effect of your treatment on dependent variable. This kind of activity you cannot do in descriptive research. Here you are not trying to test the influence of any variable upon another by using manipulation or treatment by your own. Having said this, this statement discriminates completely between non-experimental and experimental designs. As we have discussed that descriptive research falls under non-experimental research. In other words, all you are doing for readers of your research is kind of painting a picture. When people read a report that includes one of the several descriptive methods that will be discussed, they should be able to envision the larger picture of what occurred. There may be room to discuss why it occurred, and that questions is usually left to a more experimental approach. Friends, while discussing etymological confusion regarding descriptive research, you need to be very careful, because the word descriptive in its etymological sense is quite confusing in research field. As a result, there are many researchers who do not consider it as an approach in itself, because whenever we do any activity, be in research or another field, we are describing. Describing is a general word. So, for clarity's sake, we need to understand descriptive research as an umbrella term. Descriptive research should be treated as an umbrella term which attempts to answer all what is using different methods. As we have discussed earlier, that the central question of descriptive research is what is. That means descriptive research is going to answer all the what is. When we are saying what is, that means we are going to address present situation, the variables which have already occurred, and we are going to study as a follower. We are not going to manipulate, we are not going to give any treatment, we are just going to study the situation as it is. While discussing the etymological confusion, now we need to understand descriptive research as a term you will be finding in quantitative approaches as well as qualitative approaches. Under quantitative approach, descriptive research uses quantitative methods to describe what is. Describing, recording, analyzing, interpreting conditions that exist. It involves some type of comparison or contrast and attempts to discover relationships between existing non-manipulated variables. Some form of statistical analysis is used to describe the results of the study. While discussing descriptive research in qualitative approach, descriptive research uses non-quantitative methods to describe what is. Qualitative descriptive research uses systematic procedures to discover non-quantifiable relationships between existing variables. Friends, after discussing this etymological confusion, you need to make your own understanding over the term descriptive research. As I said earlier, there are many books, many literature, many researchers who do not use the term descriptive research, rather they take it as an umbrella term. Under descriptive research, they use different kinds of approaches to answer the different questions so far as research is concerned. Now, we need to understand the purpose of descriptive research. In order to execute descriptive research in true sense, you need to understand how it is different from assessment and evaluation. When we were discussing about research in primary stage, we have gone through the characteristics of research. Friends, we need to understand the characteristics of research very clearly and categorically, because there are certain cases where we equate assessment and evaluation with research. Assessment and evaluation are different from research, and we need not to overlap these three terms. So, for clarity's sake, we need to understand these three terms. Assessment. Assessment is a fact finding activity that describes conditions that exist at a particular time. No hypotheses are proposed or tested, no variable relationships are examined, and no recommendations for actions are suggested. This is the best definition I have found from Best and Khan. Similarly, you can see evaluation. Evaluation is concerned with the application of its findings and implies some judgment of the effectiveness, social utility or desirability of a product. Processes are programmed in terms of carefully defined and agreed on objectives or values. After discussing the definition of assessment and evaluation, now we need to understand how descriptive research is different from assessment and evaluation. Descriptive research, unlike assessment and evaluation, is concerned with all of the following. For example, hypothesis formulation and testing, the analysis of the relationship between non-manipulated variables, and the development of generalizations. Now, keeping in view this whole background in mind, we can try to understand the purpose of descriptive research, and summarily we can say a descriptive study describes and interprets what is. It is concerned with conditions or relationships that exist, opinions that are held, processes that are going on, effects that are evident, and trends that are developing. It is primarily concerned with the present, although it often considers past events and influences as they relate to the current conditions. Descriptive research studies have certain characteristics. Those characteristics are: number 1, they involve hypothesis formulation and its testing. Number 2, they use the logical methods of inductive deductive reasoning to arrive at generalizations. 3, they often employ methods of randomization so that error may be estimated when population characteristics are inferred from observations of samples. 4, the variables and procedures are described as accurately and completely as possible so that the study can be replicated by other researchers. 5, descriptive research methods are non-experimental because they deal with the relationships between non-manipulated variables, because the events or conditions have already occurred. The researcher merely selects the relevant variables for an analysis of their relationships. 6, the researchers need to be aware on the problems inherent in descriptive research, and this is very important for you to understand, because in descriptive research variables have already occurred, and as a researcher you are not aware on those conditions or context where they have already occurred. The researcher must be aware that the information used in ex post facto studies may be incomplete. That is, the researcher may not have sufficient information about all the events and variables occurring at the time being studied. This lack of control or even of knowledge regarding what variables were controlled makes causal statements based on this type of research very difficult to make. This problem is the post hoc fallacy. The conclusion that because two events occur at the same time or two variables are related to each other, one must have caused the other, you need to understand this post hoc fallacy very carefully, clearly and categorically. All the times you cannot say that because two variables are there, therefore one affected the other variable. Keeping in view this understanding of whole descriptive research, now we can discuss the types of descriptive research. Descriptive research in general uses following methods. Number 1, survey research, correlational research, causal comparative research, or ex post facto research. So friends, in this part of the discussion, we discussed about fundamentals of descriptive research. This is all about for this part. I hope that you have enjoyed the session. Once again, we shall meet in the next part of the presentation, in which we shall be discussing on major approaches under descriptive research. Thank you for watching this video. Namaskar.